Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have back with me my good friend Alan Peterson. Alan, welcome back.
Thanks, Tom.
Alan, I've asked you to come down and visit about a new, or at least a different MS ride that you engaged in this year, which I think was called the Ride to the River.
Yes, that's right. I've ridden a bunch of the events that you and I formerly knew as the Houston to Austin ride, the Texas MS 150, now the ACC Texas MS 150. So I rode that again back in the spring, but decided to switch my allegiance to the San Antonio based. What is the full title is Bike MS Ride to the River, because of just logistics. It's so much more convenient to drive to and from San Antonio than it is to either go to Houston or to Austin and then find some way to get back from College Station where that other ride finishes.
Now, if we have some more senior listeners, or at least senior in terms of their MS ride experiences, they might remember the Ride to the Coast. This was not the Ride to the Coast.
Looked into that this morning because you had asked about the what do they call it, Bike to the Bay,
Right.
or Ride to the Coast, whatever. It did start out that way back in 1990, I guess. Yeah, as the Bike to the Beach, and they changed it in 2009 to the Ride to the River. So it went from being a ride to Corpus and back to a ride to somewhere in the Comal County area, camp out there overnight, and then go back to San Antonio on the second day.
So you actually rode north and then back south to San Antonio?
I rode every direction, every compass point there was on Saturday to try to get enough miles. I rode a 70-mile route, and they took us out east a good ways, and then up north, and back west a little ways, and then over through New Braunfels, and we finished up on the River Road, kind of, I think, at the end of the River Road at the Lazy L&L RV park up there. Just a beautiful, that last 10-mile ride was fantastic because it was starting to get a little bit warmer and the sun was bright that day, no overcast at all. But that River Road is just tree lined and lovely. So it was a wonderful way to finish the ride.
Now, I've ridden there. There used to be a ride from San Antonio to Austin, a 2-day ride. I've ridden that, and it's an interesting ride because you're right on the Llano Estacado, and meaning where the Edwards Plateau breaks down into the flatland of part of Central Texas that we were from or both lived in. And if you don't cross over that, it's a fairly level, smooth ride. But if you do cross over that, particularly around San Marcos, where the Harvard on the Hill exists, and if you've ever had to look at that university, which is now Texas State University, and go, I have to ride up to that, and you do. Did you have to fight any of those hills along there?
So the 70-mile ride was about 2,300 feet of climb, about the same overall grade, if you will, that I'm accustomed to riding around here. Not flat, but not extra hilly.
So what was this experience, or maybe could you contrast it a little bit with the Houston, what we used to call Houston Austin, but that MS?
Right. That Texas MS 150, and of course, you and I both have experience with that back in the day when it was 13,000 riders and 180 miles over the weekend. And so I guess the two biggest contrasts that I think of from that, and the MS 150 has dropped in participation over the years to more like 7,000 now. But this ride based out of San Antonio was more like 700 riders. So much smaller crowd, which is nice in that it's big enough that it's well supported. So you've got law enforcement at the intersections to keep the cars from trying to run over you. It's big enough to have substantial rest stops with good participation from volunteers at the various places. So it's got all those good things. And it doesn't have the, oh my God, I'm going to be killed by the crush of people who are all doing unpredictable things when they get to the rest stops. And there are far fewer crazy pace line things that people come by at 25 miles an hour and there's 25 guys all doing that and nobody says anything. It's just all of a sudden they're on you. So a much more laid back experience, if you will. And I guess the downside is it's less impactful financially to the MS Society. Obviously, that ride in that Houston to Austin ride, the MS 150 raised $10 million this year, 10.6, and looks like the Ride to the River is going to close out at maybe 850K. So about so 10% of the riders, 10% of the fundraising as well.
Did they have food along the route for you, like a lunch or
They
maybe a breakfast the second day?
they did have a lunch and breakfast at the start line both days. So nice breakfast tacos at the start both days. Real good support from HEB. See the HEB on my jersey. Sorry. So they took care of us very nicely. And then the lunch on Saturday would have been great, but I just wasn't hungry. I got to the end. So we discussed I'd only rode a 70-mile ride. So I finished at 12:30. So I got to the lunch stop and said, I think I'll just have a power bar kind of thing and keep going. And I decided to do that. And then I took a bus ride to the hotel and had a lovely early dinner with my wife in New Braunfels.
I was going to ask about the evening experience, because for many of us that camping in LaGrange is a seminal part of the experience, but you were able to actually sleep in a bed with your wife, if I can say that.
You can say that. We've been married 51 years. It's absolutely okay. Yeah, and I joined a new team this year, so it was the first time collaborating with these folks. So I didn't
Right.
know precisely what they were going to do, and so I got more to talk about that too. But so decided to just do the hotel room, and which solves the problem of how do I get a ride back from San Antonio on Sunday morning too. That worked out nicely. It was comfortable. There were team tents at the New Braunfels finish line area there at the park. Lovely setting for that. A huge pavilion with dinner / lunch. You know how that is. Your time after you burned a couple thousand calories trying to get from place to place, the time of day doesn't matter so much as how empty your stomach is.
Right.
But just a lovely facility for all of that there. And so now that I know the people on my team, I can maybe do a better job of figuring out what we do collectively or whether we don't.
Was this the first time you've ridden this course?
This was the first time I rode all of the course. So I set out to do this last year and made a classic. My term for this effect is I call it testosterone poisoning. So what happened to me last year was I got started on the ride and it was on a different route. It was a lot hillier in the first 30 miles. And I decided that I was going to compete with a couple of guys that started riding ahead of me. And I was riding at, I don't know, 20% higher rate than I'd trained for. And I could probably get away with that in my 40s. I can't get away with that in my 70s. So I had horrible cramps and had to bail out at 50 miles last year. I forget even what the question was now. So
the question was about this year, the course
yeah,
for the Ride to the River.
Yeah, love the course. It had a nice support, again, very safe feeling. That's another thing that comes with only 700 riders is on the MS 150, I never wondered if I was on the right route.
Right.
Because there's always somebody either in front of you or behind you in sight. With 700 riders and 3 different routes that you might choose, you're not in line with as many people. And there were a couple of times where I thought, I wonder if I should have made that turn. And there's nobody to confirm that with. Next year, I think I'll load the route on my phone and have that in front of me so that I don't have that lack of certainty that I'm on the right path.
One of the things about the Houston to Austin ride is, obviously, if you do it once, it until for a long time stayed the same.
Mhm.
And literally every hill, every bump, every turn.
That's really true.
And so you kind of have a rhythm, even if you're only riding it once a year, it's still something that's comfortable to you. Because you've ridden that ride, which is now to College Station so often, did you miss having that comfort in knowing the route, or what did you enjoy the newness?
And again, that's part of what happened to me last year is I sort of lost track of what was coming.
Right.
And just staying within myself made that all of those concerns kind of go away pretty quickly. And then I could enjoy the scenery, and then I could chat with the people who were passing me, generally passing me going faster, as that's happening far more frequently now than it used to. But yeah, that familiarity with the road on those. So I did that ride those rides 14 times, and they changed only after I met about the 10th time, but then got quite a bit more fluid in what they were doing. So it sounds anyway, from what I read about the Ride to the River, that they've been doing more of that sort of thing than the Texas MS 150 has been doing. So they're more likely to be in a different route year over year. So maybe I'll have a different experience every year, which is cool too.
Just a few times on the MS 150, probably less than 5, could I remember being so alone, or meaning no other riders around me, that I really was able to take sort of my meditation, my thinking, my something to a very different level and just enjoy the scenery and not worry about anyone passing or really any other riders.
Right.
It sounds like you were able to have some of that
A,
experience on this ride.
a lot more of that, a lot more of that. And again, I go back to that last 10 or 12 miles up the river road. I was not alone, close enough to it that it was a meditative experience, which is something I enjoy about training by myself here, is that happens to me virtually every time I ride. Yep.
We'd be remiss if we didn't ask you about, once again, why you ride and why this is not only important to you, but actually personal to you. Could you say a few words for listeners who may not have heard you before?
Sure, Tom. Thanks. Thanks for the opportunity. Yeah, my mom had MS. She was diagnosed I'd already gone off to college, but it was, let's see, 1984 when she was diagnosed. And it was a much different diagnosis in those days than it is today, but largely because of what the MS Society's done. There's a lot of treatment possibilities, a lot of symptom modifying, disease delaying type treatments available now. Back in the day, that was not the case for my mom. And so I watched what happened to her, a relatively active, vital kind of person, degrade pretty quickly. And so, yeah, when it came to my attention that there were these rides, so I could combine cycling, which I've always loved, with fundraising for a cause that meant a lot to me, it was an obvious thing for me to do.
I don't have that personal experience in my background, but is that something you actually think about on the ride? Think about your mom, or just
Yeah,
what you're doing?
for the first time in a couple of years, or actually maybe first time in maybe 5 or 10 years, I wrote her name on my bib number to remind me of her, which was something I did far more regularly back in the past. It's the experience of watching her decline was horrible. And so there's a fair amount of sadness that goes with remembering that. But I take joy in being able to provide folks who are experiencing this now to have a different experience and an opportunity for a cure that I think is pretty likely based on what the MS Society is saying now.
One of the most moving things and meaningful things to me on the Houston Austin ride was there would be multiple people at the rest stops or the lunch breaks who had MS and who were out there. They were saying thank you. They were cheering us on. They were waving flags. They were participating to the extent they could. And I always found that very moving. Did you have any of those types of folks on this ride?
Yes. And again, with the smaller number of riders, there were a smaller number of spectators as well, but notably folks at the rest stops that were waving signs from their wheelchairs, as you say, a really moving experience. And speaking of that, the team that I chose, which is named Meat Fight San Antonio, is sponsored by a 501c3 based out of Dallas. That's their purpose, is supporting people with MS. So there were 3 people on our team that rode with MS this year. So a lot of participation in the 15 people that were riding for Meat Fight in San Antonio. 3 of them had MS or have MS.
That's very impressive.
It is. It's fantastic. So that charity has, in 15 years, donated $3 million to the MS Society. They give bicycles to MS patients. So they've given 450 bicycles to folks that they get a diagnosis and somehow Meat Fight finds out about it and they send them a bike and say, it's good if you're active. And a lot of those folks end up in these bike MS rides. So it's kind of self-supporting in that regard.
You've got a few numbers with us. Are there any numbers you can share either from the Houston event or from this event?
I do. And I guess first I'd like to just thank you and the rest of my friends and former coworkers and family that have contributed in the past and will again in the future, I'm sure. So my lifetime fundraising total is $94,600. So I'll be crossing over the 100K barrier sometime in 2026, which is, I'm really grateful to have been able to facilitate that level of contribution to the society. Interestingly, and this shows up in other numbers too. So I have 230 some people that have contributed in my name to the MS Society over the years, but about 11 of those people make up the top 50% of that contribution. So that 5% contribute 50% is pretty surprising. And thank you. You're one of those top 5%. That holds true in the Texas MS 150 and the San Antonio rides as well. So we've talked about the Club 300 thing before, where the top 300 fundraisers on the MS 150 ride contribute what I've thought was a disproportionate share, with $10 million of contributions this year for all of the ride. 5.3 million came from supporters of the Club 300 folks. So that is again about 5%. 300 of 5,500 is around 5%, and they brought in 50% of the contributions. Same sort of thing happened the year before, and I'm seeing the same thing in the San Antonio numbers. The top fundraiser, back to the HEB support picture, the top contributor for the San Antonio ride is the new CEO for HEB. So she's obviously way out there compared to the rest of us, but it's nice to see the San Antonio-based corporations coming through with support in the same way that the Houston Oil Company support has always kind of funded the MS 150.
Could you say a few words about what all of this means to the MS Society of Texas?
Bike MS, there's 49 rides a year. There have been, let's see what, I just happen to have those numbers too, some 35,000 riders and 3,500 teams a year do these rides. Bike MS has funded $1.5 billion in research to the MS Society. So as a fundraising entity, it's been quite successful. I don't know what percentage of the MS Society's budget it is, but it's in Texas, it used to be 90% for the Texas MS Society came from those fundraising events, and super successful. This is the 41st year for the MS 150 in Texas, the 36th year for the San Antonio based ride. So a long history of support from the state of Texas citizenry in keeping these charities going.
I don't think I've ever asked you this, but have you ever uncovered or been told how they came up with the idea of a bike event as a fundraiser?
I don't. It started so the MS 150 in Texas started in 1981.
Right.
There was one before that was in Minnesota. I don't know how that came up, but it quickly got adopted as a way to do things. My first MS ride was in Colorado. Correct. In 1992. It's been going a good long while. That's a great question. I'll ask the team of folks that I lean on for MS bike ride history.
I can't remember who wrote this, but someone wrote in the Chronicle, I think it was in the first decade, because that's when I was pretty seriously riding, that the MS Houston Austin was a rite of passage for any cyclist in Houston. At some point, you had to do the MS, and that included people who were serious about riding, some less serious, and because it was set up for everyone.
What a fantastic segue into the rest of the perception is. So yeah, the route's different. The number of riders are different. Maybe the sponsors at the rest stops are different, but what's the same is that the people you run into on the bikes out there are all just having a wonderful time, right? There's something about doing something that's active that is benefiting someone else that is just magic, right? So if you thought you were having a crappy month or something, go ride your bike and have it be for a purpose like that, and your troubles just melt away. And the kinds of, we already talked about the number of people who are riding with MS, which is obviously physically challenging, but there are folks that are classic cycling physiques out there riding on multi-decade $1,000 worth of bicycles, and there are folks on beach cruisers that look like they could use the exercise, and everybody's having the same experience, right? It's a great time.
So are you really going to be able to stay away from Houston to Austin or Houston to College Station next year? Are you going to get an itch starting in April?
I think you know me pretty well. I was Club 300 again last year. So if I want to get the Club 300 swag, I have to show up. And so I did indeed at least register. And I haven't broken that to my wife yet, but I may need to do that this evening when I get off of this talk with you. But yeah, it's certainly possible that I find myself doing that. I had resolved last year that the year before was my last ride, and I failed to execute to that plan. But yes, 2023 on that one ride, I raised, or my friends, family, and former coworkers contributed, 12,000 ish on my behalf, about 13,000 last year. And this year with the two rides, I sort of de-emphasized fundraising in the spring,
right,
and still combined the two rides is about the same, about 13.5. for this year. If I do, I'll let you know. But yeah, certainly it's a possibility.
Any really closing thoughts or anything else that you want to share either about this ride, your journey to help support MS, or anything else?
Tom, thanks again for the opportunity. I enjoy these sessions with you and I, kind of reliving what it was like in the day, and I appreciate being asked about what it's like for me today too. I'm grateful to have the health to be able to do these kinds of things, even at my advanced age. And I'm really happy to have the support of so many wonderful folks that see the benefit of what the MS Society has been able to do.
It seems it's almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. You ride for MS, you become healthier, and you can continue to ride.
Exactly.
So the riding for the donations has led to probably a healthier Alan.
It certainly has.
All right. I look forward to visiting with you in the spring when you're getting ready for the spring ride. And with these smaller courses, perhaps I can join you.
I'd look forward to that. Thanks, Tom.